Hello, everybody. I'm Pat. I'm the Beard.
And I'm Josh, going with the hat on that. This is the Beard and Hat Show, episode numero uno.
Yeah, we'll call it 1A.
1A?
Yeah.
Are you sure it's not 1B?
Yeah, 1B.
Episode 1, version 2.
Yeah.
Should we discuss our previous flub first, or introduce our guest
Well,
first?
we'll introduce our guest first. So,
Yeah.
Lots of people know who he is, but for the two people that don't, Jamie Stark from Microsoft is here. And,
Hi!
And Jamie, we'll let you kind of introduce yourself and tell us what you do at Microsoft.
So, I'm Jamie. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, which means I work in the engineering organization, and I work in the Teams team engineering organization, and I look after the IT Pro admin console called Teams Admin Center that IT pros use to do operation, administration, and management of teams. Prior to my move over to engineering, I looked after the voice stuff in the marketing organization, from Skype for Business Online to Skype for Business Server to Link Server to OCS to that's kind of where I started.
All these?
No, I didn't do LCS. So I came in kind of right there. So beta, I want to say there was beta 3 of OCS. Where I was right around that time frame prior to the launch of OCS. When OCS launched, I got to do part of the shindig, so it was kind of fun.
So excellent. We've all known you for a number of years, and you're the person to go to that has all the answers that we need.
Not anymore, man.
Having been in the marketing group, and you are always the wisdom and everything, so we know who to ask. But
Appreciate that.
And we have to say an extra giant thank you for being at this table right now, as this is take 2 on this.
This is a different table than where we were before.
And we've already had one failure.
We did.
Look at that.
My camera gimbal failed there. So,
There we go. So we are relying on
So
this.
you guys tell the story, and I'll see if I can fix the camera again.
So, we set out to record this earlier in the week to get that video out there during Ignite, and we had a nice podcast booth
that might
space
not
set
work,
up.
Jamie. Don't worry about it.
And then as we get rolling, I may have forgotten to unmute this mic, and Pat's phone that was recording may have gotten an Amber Alert that cut our recording completely.
Yep.
Completely.
Double failure. What are the odds that we would have something like that?
A couple of amateurs here, I guess, and so and I had the pleasure of,
as Jamie tries valiantly to fix the camera gimbal, but
I had the pleasure of finding this out as I'm standing face to face with Jamie in the Microsoft Teams booth, and I see Pat's message, and I look up at Jamie, and I'm just like, oh no.
Yeah, that was great. So we were literally in the booth. We everyone that comes out to Ignite has some type of booth duty if you're associated with Microsoft. And so first, thank you both of you for taking time to share your expertise in the booth. It is uniquely valuable because, especially in someone coming from engineering, I sit in the kind of IT Pro section and I can talk about our product. But there is so much just practical experience and advice and tribal knowledge that you all can share about your specific experiences with deploying Skype and deploying Teams and making customers successful. That is just invaluable. Mm-hmm. And so being able to have, I think, that diversity of conversation within the booth is tremendous. And I really want to thank you for spending the time out there. I know it's not easy and straightforward to do. Sometimes it can be tiring and goofy, and you may not know like what kind of plans or roadmap stuff or whatever we have going on, but
I gotta say though, it's almost kind of a learning experience for me as well, because you field a lot of questions, you feel like you helped some people, but some of the things you're asked, you actually end up learning quite a bit on the spot, and that's awesome. I love that give and take element of it.
So I worked several shifts in the content capture booth.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a sexy new feature and everything that kind of sells itself, So people would come up and they were taking all these selfies in front of the whiteboard and writing stuff and seeing how it works. And at one time I had like 10 people queued up to play with this.
Right.
And people were like, wait, all I need is a simple webcam to do this? What other magic do we need? So it was nice to say, that's really all it is, and they go, wow, they're taking notes down and they're asking all these questions, and I had a customer that had 15,000 conference rooms, And so they ask some questions that would
Let's take a break and get that name.
Where's my business cards? But it was nice because then you get a different kind of question about scale and management and stuff that we don't see in some of the smaller organizations, and questions that you really didn't think about, right? And it was great. It was a great learning experience, as you said, Josh. And it was great to just connect with all these people and see how they kind of get excited about these features now that they're able to see it in action.
For me as a product manager, it is by far the most valuable set of time is to be talking with people after my session, and I literally learned, like, I just grab my notebook as I'm pulling all my stuff down after my session. I grab my notebook and I sit down and I start talking with customers, because invariably someone will be like, hey, I've tried this thing and it's goofy, and here's what I'm trying to do and it doesn't work, and I'm writing it down, and that's like going straight into the backlog, because it's just it is incredibly valuable. We try so hard to think about all the different scenarios, and you just can't.
No,
Right.
You can test the hell out of something. You can think about all it, but at the end of the day, someone is going to have a different use case.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that's a big advantage to having the MVPs. They're coming in from the outside.
Yes.
Microsoft's looking out from the inside.
Yes.
And
you all proxy so much customer engagement and then distill that in a way that is so actionable for us to be able to then integrate it into our product plans. It's true. It's tremendous. But yeah, like time of the booth, time after the sessions. I think I started my spreadsheet on Monday night of like, hey, this is stuff we need to address, and it's at least like a couple dozen items now, and it's just and it's everything from like big customers having kind of big customer experiences and trying to make sure that's easier to smaller customers that are looking to have things more streamlined and more straightforward and more actionable for their IT teams, and it's just Ignite is. It's incalculably valuable for us, honestly.
I think most people that go, and it's but you talking about the booth, that kind of brings me. I'd like to use that segue to say, kind of, what did you hear the most at the booth? For me, oh my goodness, I think at the IT admin section especially, because I was there twice. So much talk about private channels.
So when you mentioned, okay, so you said earlier how we learn at the booth. I didn't know how private channels worked, kind of in the gory details of it. Like I'm familiar with the APIs that we need, and I'm familiar with the types of controls that we have available and all that stuff in order to build the experience as an admin center. But I didn't know that it created a site collection, a separate site collection in the background, and that's why you can't flip a normal channel into a private channel or a private channel into a normal channel, because you've got these assets that are essentially tied to the existence of that channel, and it's like, oh, I
with
get it.
Independent ACLs on each.
Exactly, right? Because if you didn't do it like that, then somebody who was a member of the team would still be able to have access to the files and stuff that are a function of the private channel, and obviously for a private channel that doesn't make any sense.
And then consequently other things like retention capabilities are down the line, because that just doesn't apply to the current architecture. You got to find a way to bring that in. All kinds of learning opportunities. But,
absolutely. There's a ton of conversation around private channel, a ton of conversation around voice that I had, and that was I wasn't even in the voice booth, but I had people coming up with all aspects of from moving from server to online, moving from Skype for Business into Teams. How do I grow my voice plant within Teams? Yeah.
As a consultant, a year ago, we saw a lot of customers who were doing proofs of concept with voice and Teams and stuff like that, figure out, does it work? Is it a viable replacement for legacy PBXs? And now as we kind of fast forward, we see a lot of those proofs of concept evolving into pilots and full deployments. And here at Ignite this year, we see a lot of engagement around calling, like you said, around meeting rooms. That was kind of the area that I kind of focused on.
There's a ton of maturity that's happened in those spaces over the last year, and people are saying it actually might be time now.
Yeah, right. Because I think last year we were like, we know we're doing this work and it's going to be there, and here's what it looks like. But it still was nascent, right? Mm-hmm. And now, I feel like we've we articulated that earlier in last Ignite, and now we've demonstrated that we're delivering on this. We're continuing to deliver new work in direct routing. We're continuing to deliver new scenarios and meetings. Absolutely.
We're still okay. We're not blinking still. Good. Okay. Yeah. Just to make sure. I'm doing a periodic check that nothing happened. Okay. My favorite booth moment, though, I'll say, I was doing the admin duty with Jamie on that one, and a customer comes up and wants to know how to get the Teams item off of the left-hand nav.
The icon?
Yeah, the icon for Teams. And so we start doing app setup policies. Jamie goes in there and sets it up, and we're like, yeah, but it's going to take a while with the policies to apply and all that. He applies the policy. Never seen a policy take effect in the admin center that fast, and boom! I just saw Jamie remove Teams from Teams.
Yep. The demo gods were smiling at that point.
Seriously, the demo gods were smiling. They were not smiling on me for my second session. For that, I apologize to everybody who came out for that. That was kind of a bummer. But no, that was crazy. So there's a whole backstory on this. We know very viscerally the amount of time it takes to have policies get assigned to users in the backend system. And there's a huge pipeline from not just us as the admin center going in and talking to the core policy backend, but then for that to propagate through all the different pieces of infra in order to hit down into the client. And it is not insignificant, but it's something that we've really focused on that pipeline in the back end to be able to make sure that is as fast as possible. Still, in some cases, you can find that it takes a little while for policy to propagate, but literally in this case, created the policy, assigned it to the user, dropped Teams, signed it back in, and it was gone. And it was just, my mouth was agape. I was like, oh, that just worked. That's so cool.
It was a classic moment.
Yeah, that was that. I totally remember that. And
I totally would have recorded that if I knew that was going to happen. that was.
I know.
Well, you mentioned, sometimes there's a gap, and the new features that have come out, private channels and all these things. Just the fact that Microsoft is able to roll that out across all of these zillions of tenants, and how long that has to take. I mean, you're talking about a policy that might affect a few users in an organization, but think about how long it takes to push out all this private channels infrastructure and configuration across all of Office 365. It's monumental. I mean, I can't imagine. I've been in a Microsoft data center and just looked and said, this is the coolest stuff in the world. And I know that there's these data centers all over the world, and all these changes in ones and zeros have to propagate everywhere. And just so kudos to Microsoft for being able to handle something at scale like that and push out new features in a timely manner, right? So,
it wasn't in rolling out for the next 3 weeks, right? Yeah, totally. No, and we're private channels, as everyone is aware, has had a lot of energy and attention placed upon it, right? Yeah. And so back in Bellevue, there was a war room going on. People were watching the metrics on like a minute by minute basis. Bringing in pizzas to make sure that all the engineers are fed, jumping on cases where we're seeing errors and trying to track them down and make sure, like, okay, is this something that we would expect in a given tenant scenario? Is this something that we wouldn't expect? If it isn't, like, let's dive on it. Let's make sure it's clean. So we all knew the level of attention and the level of interest in private channels, and we absolutely made sure that the right folks were there, standing by, making sure that rollout happened clean and consistent, and everyone was happy with it. So it was awesome. It was, and just to be able to have it, of course, show up in Teams Admin Center and be like, "Hi, awesome, let's play."
Yeah, exactly. It's there now.
Totally.
And Admin Center, that's your bread and butter, right? So
it's my thing.
You work on that stuff. So lots of things that came out. Lots of new features out this week, or announced, or introduced, and some really cool stuff coming, and some really cool stuff that is already there. So let's take a brief walk through what's there now.
Sure.
In the last week or the last few weeks that you've been responsible
for. So the first thing that comes to mind is as part of the launch of Business Voice, so the offering that we have for small and medium-sized businesses, we wanted to make sure that their kind of onboarding experience is super great, and so that team made a whole onboarding wizard, so that way if you're buying these licenses, then it kind of steps you through the process of acquiring phone numbers and setting up an auto attendant, doing all those things. And then you also then use Teams Admin Center for your kind of ongoing management of that. one of which is porting. So if you wanted to, after you set up your tenant and you want to port some numbers over from your existing carrier, you need to have a great experience in order to do that. That's something that we literally launched last week, porting availability for the UK and Canada in support of the launch for SMB Voice. And so used to be the porting was super weird and complicated, where you'd have to download a form and fill it out and do all this stuff. Now it's 95% set up on the Teams Admin Center itself. You still have to sign the thing,
right.
Like, so we generate it automatically, but you still have to sign it because that's the legal authority that a customer is giving to Microsoft to advocate on their behalf to have numbers be transferred over. But that was a huge amount of work for us to be able to integrate all that in at the right timing, to be able to make sure that that was available for the Business Voice launch. So that was one that we were super excited about.
And for people that haven't really heard about Business Voice, basically for small orgs under 300 seats or so that are able to use like business premium licenses and utilize some of the voice features within Teams. So a great way for Microsoft to kind of fill that gap for the SMB market.
It's been a conversation for a while. I said this during our first recording, and I'll say it again. I did a session the day right before that it was announced. That was all about licensing, and specifically called out that scenario. You must have enterprise licensing for phone system. And the next day, I was like, never mind, that's live. We're good to go. SMBs, it's coming eventually. But to my credit, not in the U.S. yet. So,
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, eventually. But I've seen the Wizards that you were talking about. And man, that was nice.
Right?
So kudos. I mean, from A to Z, everything in there. I mean, in 10 minutes or so, you've done everything that you need to do.
I know.
And that's it.
It's nuts.
You don't have
right.
to. You don't have to bring in a consultant, which tugs at me a little bit because I'm a consultant. But I get it. I mean, you shouldn't have to when you're in small orgs that don't have dedicated IT staff.
Right.
You should be able to just go in there, click a few boxes, make some decisions, and let those things take place. And kudos to Microsoft.
I think it's a really good point. Like, this doesn't change the amount of complexity or sophistication that exists for Business Voice customers. It's not like Business Voice customers get Teams Lite voice or anything like that. They have all the facility there. They have all the features and all the services. And if they want to, create custom dial plans and do all this like really sophisticated stuff, they totally have the ability to do that. What we're doing is we're lowering that barrier to entry, right? And so for a big company, the barrier to entry is not that big of a deal. They're used to complex software. They're used to online services. They're used to hiring, smart consultants. And so
you'd have to point it at smart consultants. That's not me, but
no, actually digressing a little bit, you mentioned on the kind of focus on voice. One of the things that we did new at Ignite this year was we had tracks kind of within that were specifically oriented around a particular feature. So instead of just breakouts, we said, hey, let's have 5 sessions, stack them up one after the other, and have them talk through the granularity of a particular workload. And so the one that I participated in was voice. And so it started off with Paul.
A natural fit.
It started off with Paul kicking off, kind of giving the marketing view. Nikolai came up and talked about direct routing, and then I followed to hit up managing voice, and then Andy Bybee hit up a couple different sessions on APIs. And I'm really curious what people's thoughts are on that, because I was talking with Tom Arbuthnot before my last session earlier, and he was really complimentary. He's like, boy, this makes a lot of sense to just have a focused chunk of time where you can go into additional depth, because there's no way that we could do 45 minutes on voice is just, there's no way to have the right level of specificity, right? You've got to do it in multiple sessions, but to have them back to back in that kind of series, I think made a lot of sense.
I think it was called learning paths. Is that
that's right.
Learning. So, and I heard a lot of good feedback before the Ignite, knowing that this was coming, and then you could start planning things that way. It made it really easy to plan. That's kind of one of the struggles, I think, with going to such a large conference like Ignite, is you kind of have to do a lot of filtering through what you want to do, where it's at, how to map getting there, all that. And by the way, the mobile app this year, you can route to different places in the app.
It worked
really cool
well.
stuff.
Yeah,
but,
no, they did a good improvement on that, totally.
Yeah, but the learning paths, I think a lot of people are thinking this really helps streamline planning out our Ignite.
Yep.
I don't have to chase down voice all these different days and all these different places. They have told me where I need to go to get this done.
That's right.
And even at the Microsoft Teams booth, they had printouts there
That you could of all the different sessions, all the different learning paths.
Nicely laid out, nicely tracked out. It's a very good approach, and I think the feedback is going to be largely positive.
So yeah, if you came to Ignite and if you think that the whole learning paths thing made sense and you want us to do it again, you know how to communicate that to us, right? Right? Feedback.
So my feedback around that was a brilliant concept and well executed. But one thing that I noticed on the hub, which is the expo floor here at Ignite, is that related vendors weren't near each other. Right, so you had like an E911 vendor, in one far corner, and SBC vendors and everything kind of way off in the distant area. So if somebody was kind of centralizing on the voice aspect, they ended up all over, and it was somewhat difficult because you were constantly looking things up and trying to figure out where everybody was. Now, there's an advantage to that because now you're walking by all these other booths.
Right. Exactly.
There's a chance, but
from a conference organizer perspective, you can understand why you might.
I know exactly. Yep. We've all three actually been in the conference organizer position. I was just thinking of like, how would we organize a booth by to where you'd have like segments of, and I was
give
like,
value to all sponsors.
Wow, that would be hard.
But I mean, even like the way that the expo floor is laid out here with third-party vendors being in the front part of the building and all the Microsoft booths and stuff being in the back.
That's perfect.
Okay, that's perfect.
Makes sense.
But,
exactly.
If you had all the Teams stuff with Teams related
that was kind of proximal to the Un365 office kind of area.
Because I get it. There's a lot of generalists that come here that are responsible for multiple platforms, Exchange and Teams and SharePoint and all that stuff. But there's a lot of people that come here that are specialists that just want to focus on that area too. So I get it. It's you can justify either way, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I did hear is that there was kind of a disconnect as to where vendors were. But you get to walk over. I put tons of miles on my shoes this week, walking over and looking at every different booth and figuring out what people were doing.
Well, for the swag hunters too, they get to collect more along the way, right? So.
And I do love the completeness that we have at Ignite, that like everything that we talk about with respect to kind of enterprises and businesses and IT pros is out here for consumption at Ignite. I personally got to go and see Mark Grasinovich talk about quantum computing.
Nice.
That was the session that I had to bail out of in order to do our failed recording, by the way. So yeah, I know, right? I totally have to pick up the second half of the session. But it's just like I'm listening to Grasinovich talk about quantum mechanics. Like, this is awesome. This checks so many of my boxes.
but let's talk about that. So you had to bail out of the session to come meet with us, and we certainly appreciate that. But one of the things that as an attendee you could do is you can go and listen, download that session and listen to it later, have access to the slide deck, everything, which is nice.
Yeah, and as a speaker, I definitely think about having. Like, yes, I'm very much wanting to talk to the people that are in the room, but in the back of my mind, I'm always like making sure that this exists as an artifact that has utility going forward.
Yes. Yeah.
That this is something that we want to be able to use to reference to people for the next 9 months or so until we're in the lead up for the next Ignite. To be able to say like, hey, this is kind of where we are. This is the state of play. And as a useful piece of content for people to take advantage of.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. So back over to Admin Center stuff. What's new? Looking forward here, we got some really cool stuff this Ignite.
Oh man,
very exciting things to start playing with. We're excited we can do more there now for our customers. But
so one of the things that we have done in Admin Center over the last year is we've added a tremendous amount of additional policies. I want to say we're up to like a little bit over a dozen policies right now. What that means is there's a dozen little things you have to make a choice on for a given user if you want to assign them user level specific policies, custom policies. That can be complicated, and so we were struggling with this on like, how do we make this easier for folks? And one of the approaches that we came up with was, let's try to group policies together into a package and then assign the package to a user. So then that way,
like a profile.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I related it in the session. Because I know you guys think about this in working with customers, is segmenting customers based on their use cases and going like, okay, so your devs are going to be doing this type of stuff, and your salespeople are going to be remote, and they're going to be using mobile, and they're going to be having this type of usage.
As Network Planner puts it, your personas, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Profiles or personas, and so essentially to think about organizing policy in that way, and then assigning not all these individual policies, but assigning a package of them. And so we have this very, very early days, the very initial release of it. So additional packages are going to be coming out today. It's primarily for education customers.
Yeah.
So that's where it starts. We're going to be adding more for additional verticals that we see as like, hey, for healthcare, for the nurses, you're going to want to have a messaging policy that includes the ability to do urgent notifications, for example, because that's a great use case for a nurse to be able to find a specialist and to be able to continuously ping them for every 2 minutes, right? And then, in addition to that, being able to allow people to roll their own custom packages.
Okay.
Right? So then that way you can define, okay, for the lawyers, they're going to get this meeting policy and this messaging policy and this voice policy, and for my devs, it's going to be something different. Then I can have those as collections.
I actually had a question about that in the booth.
Oh, perfect.
I was like, I don't know. But, and the guy that was working in the booth with me too, we looked up the announcement and said, oh yeah, coming in the future, they're going to add some more. But the specific question was, how can I add my own? Is that coming? And we were just both like,
you can't add your own today.
But
this has been this is just the very, very beginning of this feature, and clearly this is the direction we want to go.
But that is a desired direction, is to be able to have custom add your own things. Like
Totally.
Okay. Well, that'll make that one person that asked that question very happy.
Then also on the policy front, policy assignment to groups. So that's in preview now in PowerShell. So Pat and your company get to play with it first. Then it does a lot with respect to the way that you think about how users get policies. So today, essentially, a user can get a policy either through the tenant-wide kind of default policy, or a single custom policy that's assigned to them. This is kind of a middle ground between those two, where now a user is part of a group, you can assign the policy to the group, and then it propagates to all the members of the group. And as the group changes, that policy stays up to date.
So dynamic group membership.
Yeah, exactly. So it's super slick. We're really excited about that, but we definitely need to build out some guidance for IT pros within the admin center, so that way they can see precisely where that policy is being derived. Because there's also conditions with groups where a user can be a member of two different groups, and then you have to have a prioritization. Exactly. Right. This has to be deterministic, and so we have a mechanism there to rank what groups get what policies, and then based on that would determine what policy the end user gets. And so we have, I shared some design specifications that we have that we're actually using to build this out in Teams Admin Center. It's not available today, but I shared kind of our direction of where we're going to go with this.
Very nice. I mean, that's really in line with the ability to use dynamic groups to apply licensing and all kinds of other things throughout the M365 experience.
Totally.
And into Azure. So it's great to see that coming to Teams.
So it just makes it that much easier for people when they are getting into really customizing their Teams experience, and doing that on a kind of per cohort or per group level. It makes tons of sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
One of the things that I really liked, and we just came from your session just before we recorded on analytics, was some of the great flexibility in there to kind of see what's going on. I'm reminded because I worked at Event Zero, and Event Zero, a lot of the technology was acquired by Microsoft and rolled into this. So it was great to see some of that stuff being fleshed out in Teams and everything. And because let's face it, you want that mean time to innocence. You want to be able to look. You get a call from somebody who says, "I just had a poor call quality." Or a poor call experience. You want to be able to look in there and find out what's going on, right? Is this a minor issue? Is this a more systemic issue? And what can we do to fix it? And so I think that was, as that gets enhanced, I think that's kind of filling some of the gaps that we have seen about the ability to troubleshoot and have something that is stable enough that organizations feel comfortable enough to roll off of a legacy PBX onto onto the cloud, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, I'm not really sure I want to go to the cloud.
Right.
And so now you've got some of these checks and balances and controls and everything that kind of ease that discomfort. So.
Exactly. Yeah. No. If you can't own all the pieces of the network between the client and the server, like you start to feel a little squirrely about it, and we want to provide all that data that says like, no, okay, this stuff is actually working all right. You sized your network appropriately.
It can be really hard to take your hands off and say, okay, if you say so. And, something I learned from your session, this last session just now, is really cool from the call analytics perspective for troubleshooting and for the admin that then has to raise a support ticket is the ability, the export.
I knew it.
I was like, that's beautiful because there's so much information that can be exposed there. But like you said, going through and being requested to take screenshot after screenshot and give that to support, that's not tenable,
This literally came from a customer ask, and that's why again it is so valuable for us to have these experiences at Ignite and to be able to meet with customers and to hear their stories and to hear what's hard and what's kind of sending them sideways, what's slowing down their deployments, because we want to unblock all of that. And this was a perfect case of just where they said, look, you have all this data, and I'm like, well, yeah, and they're like, because you're displaying it on the webpage, well, yeah, well, just package it and dump it into a CSV. I'm like,
exports,
well, yeah, that's really easy for us to do, as a matter of fact. Well, of course we can do that. Like that's then the other beautiful thing was that it was entirely within our world, right? Like I didn't have to go and ask it.
Right.
I have to go, wait on a dependency somewhere else in another team. I was like, well, yeah. Of course we can build that.
Beautiful.
No, and so all of these, that's why these conversations I think are just so tremendously valuable, because we absolutely have the ability to shape the direction of the product with customer feedback, and I hope that as we tell this story across successive Ignites and across successive shows like Comms to Be Next, that we're showing that progress, and that the community is holding us accountable to that progress, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's super important, and we want to make sure that we're doing right by the users of our software.
Yeah. I mean, and along those lines, user voice, to put that out there. I always like to give a shout out to that for whenever we can, to say user voice. It's not a we don't know the answer, please go away type of thing. When we say go put this in user voice, go vote it up, seriously, whatever your experiences have been with feedback channels in the past, user voice is very, very well listened to, very well communicated from the team.
No, I have a field in VSO, in Visual Studio now, Azure Development Online. I have a field for the user voice entry when I create a new feature, right? Like I can directly link in the commentary and the voting and everything else that is in user voice. I can directly link that into the thing that we use to manage and to track our work.
Yeah.
Like.
There's no guarantee that putting it in user voice means it's going to get done.
Right.
But it's a super responsive platform. It's not just going nowhere. It's being looked at.
This isn't a black hole. This is just a way for us at scale to be able to adjudicate between really popular features. Like there are a lot of features that are out there that are really popular. And we want to be able to have data to be able to be able to say like, okay, this one we're going to spend the time and the resources to be able to put this out, versus something else that we may delay a quarter or whatever.
Yeah,
totally.
Private channels, right? If you look on user voice, private channels was very popular.
Definitely.
Lots of opinions on where is it? We need this. It's a dependency or a requirement for coming over from Slack or whatever the case may be.
Totally.
But what I find is interesting is I look through some of the stuff on user voice and I go, oh yeah. I see lots of stuff there that I completely agree with, and I see a lot of stuff that I really hadn't thought about that.
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And I'll go ahead and support that. And obviously on the flip side, you see some stuff and you just think, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Or
that might be really, really corner case.
Or maybe we need to understand that scenario a little bit more.
But it's like Josh said, it's a great tool to voice your opinion, your request. Mention some of the roadblocks that you have in either using Teams at all or rolling it out to a specific workload or whatever.
Or having to manage it at scale. Yeah, absolutely.
I will say though, if if user voice had been a drinking game at the team's booth this last time, we would have all been, because there's so many great ideas that are brought out, especially on private channels. I like it that it's here. Let's do this and this and this. The amount of times I had to say, that's awesome, that's good, and they want to hear that, this is the place you do it at. Oh man, user voice was said a lot. So,
and it's great because it's not a one-way tool. Right?
No.
Oh no!
You go in there and there's responses from Microsoft. This is actively being worked on, or please provide more information so that we can understand the ask for this and everything. I mean, some of it is we're working on this, which is a little ambiguous. It's people want to know.
But you
I want this right now.
But you get excited because that's the thing is it'll say under consideration, but then you'll also see if something's being worked on, that they've agreed to take it on and they're starting to do work.
And that means it's actually there are people that are actually they're writing the specs or they're doing the engineering design or they're encoding or we're doing tests or absolutely.
And some of that might be please put an export button in the analytics, which is theoretically relatively simple to do. Compared to we need private channels, which there's all this stuff on the back end.
The whole pipeline.
Start
a new company to create this kind of thing.
The one thing about user voice, and people will tweet out, a link to some of the things on user voice that they're passionate about or that they're trying to drive, right?
Right.
And so the one that I saw the other day was the API for the presence APIs for things like busy lights. Right, so it's not in the Teams client, right? So somebody tweeted that out, and I went and looked at it because I really appreciate presence tools and stuff. I have lights in my house
Meat
that are
space presence.
that are tied to my presence and everything. I went and looked at it, but just the fact that somebody tweeted it out, it blew up.
Oh, really?
and literally, and so because I had gone out and upvoted it, I got a notification for every comment that got left after that, and for about 3 days, they were just, yes, we need this, yes, we need this. So it really got things rolling, and I think that really helps Microsoft say, hey, look.
It is a crowdsourcing
this.
tool. I mean, not just a feedback tool, but then you can use it to say, everybody else pile on that agrees, and that's how private channels got to where it was. That's how some of these other ones, people passionately shared it.
And that's got to drive integration by third-party vendors, right? They look in there and they see, hey, all these people want all these APIs for presence because they want these API tool or these presence tools. What can we do?
Yeah, exactly. And then they can start preparing, and they can start thinking if we had these APIs or if we had these capabilities, then how could we improve our third-party products and interactive teams?
Right, because we've known for years that Microsoft really likes the partner ecosystem to get involved in products, right? So a big question that I get as I talk to customers that are coming from legacy PBXs is, well, what about contact center stuff, and why is that not in there? Because Microsoft wants to use the partner ecosystem to drive that and come up with their own solutions. It offers flexibility to meet all the requirements and everything. And so I think as some of these APIs roll out, and they really need to roll out. Okay.
Well, you're sitting there.
On the platform team. Happy to represent anything in the admin center.
I talked to some of the organizations, Matt Landis and those guys about what kind of APIs they need to really come out with some rock solid solutions that fill some gaps. And the fact that Microsoft's going to make those available is great. It's not a closed loop. That's going to be great.
Totally.
Work to be done. Well, this has been great. We're glad that you took a time out for a second time.
It feels so good for Ignite to almost be done.
And I feel better that we didn't pull you out of a session this time. You finished your session, and I
was delivering it.
I know,
No, and I thought that went really well. It's funny. The whole 45-minute thing is still rough. It's still like it's all of a sudden it's over, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's rough for me because I'm old and I've been doing 75-minute sessions for a long time. And for me, there's the ability to play a little bit within a 75-minute session that you can go a little more fast and loose. But man, 45, you're just
stay on it.
Anyway, but I thought it went all right. I appreciate you coming out and
No, it was awesome to be there. I'm just glad that you had some more time for us. Thank you.
We were going to heckle you from the back row, but it was just so much great content. You know,
well, I didn't give you the opportunity. I didn't stop talking enough.
That's right.
Yeah. We weren't really in a heckling position anyway at that stage, so
Well, hey. Maybe this will come out someday.
maybe. But thank you so much, Jamie.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
Awesome.
It was great seeing you. It's awesome to be able to hang out with the community. And again, thank you both so much for all the time you spent in the booth. That is
awesome.
That means
absolutely.
It's fun.
Good time.
It's fun. You know, like you said earlier, it can be tiring, you know, because you're standing there and you're just talking to people for hours and hours, and you might want to go to a session or whatever, but it's a great way to connect with people and get ideas.
It's so valuable.
And,
it really
and
is.
just, you know, show off some of the things that
Totally.
you're passionate about.
Worth it in so many ways.
The context switching though is super fun. Like voice question, private channels question, licensing question, new feature question, meetings question, and it's just like
all kinds of things.
Anyway, so
thank you for sticking with us through the Beard and Hat Show episode.
Yep.
Super excited.
Yep. Make sure you follow us at Beard and Hat Show
on Twitter, and we've got a YouTube channel that you should also follow and keep up there. And we'll see how this thing goes over the course of the next several months here. But
as the speeding segue races by,
this is a real conference.
In a giant conference center.
We'll see you guys in episode 2.
All right, thanks.